Hello, Miko Pisu Nepio, Nitase Kasun. My English name is Jason Baerg. I'm Cree Métis from Saskatchewan on my mother's side, and my father was born in the Ukraine and emigrated to Canada. He's German, so it's a real honor and a pleasure to present with our Tawasquia path or gap between the trees. I think I'm an introvert. I think being a creative person who is introverted really led me to the disciplines of drawing and painting. When I was younger, I thought about aspirational spaces. When you would watch the Olympics as kids, I had 4 siblings, and what Olympic sport would you compete in? And I wasn't really interested in any of that. And when it would come time for the Oscars, it would be like, well, if you could win any Oscar, what Oscar would you want to win? And even as a young child, I thought, well, I would rather be behind the scenes, like a director. I think that would be what I would esteem towards if I was ever to win an Oscar. So I just think there was something in my spirit that was creative and introverted, and I think that drawing and painting is really about, making the work, putting it in space, walking away from it, and then allowing the performance in itself to animate community. So that's really how I came to drawing and painting. It was an interesting time as well, studying at Concordia, as Guido Molinari and Yves Gaucher were kind of like receding from this scene, and painting was kind of taking a back seat, but I was traveling a lot, and I would go to New York a lot, and I knew that painting was alive and well, so it was really something to respond to or react to. They were really interested in, cinema. Film was very strong at Concordia, photography was very strong at Concordia, ceramics, fiber arts, anything but painting. And so I kind of assumed that challenge, and I reacted to that, and I committed to drawing and painting. Tawasquia. I am really grateful to have the opportunity to present a mid-career survey. And the mid-career survey started at the Woodland Cultural Center, and the reason for that was the very first curator who ever gave me a studio visit was Tom Hill from the Woodland Cultural Center when I was in my 2nd or 3rd year here at Concordia. And at the time I had no idea the magnitude of that visit. And after I realized how important it was actually Ryan Rice who emailed me. I was doing a stage, and he was like, congratulations about your exhibition at the Walter Phillips Gallery. And I didn't realize it was curated into a major exhibition of Indigenous artwork. And so it was really through Tom introducing me to the Indigenous art world that the doors opened. And so, I think presenting the show first at the Woodland Cultural Center made a lot of sense because they were some of the first to have my work in their collection, and over the years they had also fostered my career development in various capacities through exhibition assistance through the Ontario Arts Council. So they would receive proposals for exhibition assistance, and through that process, they got a frequent update as to what was happening in my studio. And so I had this ongoing conversation with them. And so when it came time for a mid-career survey, Naomi Johnson was gracious enough to host that exhibition. And so we started there, and then the exhibition went on to the Cambridge Art Galleries. And I actually worked with one of my colleagues from Concordia, who I did my undergrad with, Iga Jansen. She curated the exhibition in Cambridge, and then this is the third exhibition on the tour. It is slated to go to the Man Art Gallery, which is back in my home community in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, where I was raised, next summer. And then it's to go on to Canada House after that in the fall of 2021. So, but it's funny, when I was thinking about the tour, I really wanted to bring it into spaces and communities that I had relationships in. So it was very important for this work to come to Montreal, because I spent 5 critical years developing here in a really powerful community. So I'm just really grateful that it could come to Art Noir. So Tawaskuya was really intended to be a 25-year retrospective, and the very first catalog of my work will happen as a result of these exhibitions. So the Woodland Cultural Center is a sizable museum space, as is the Cambridge Art Galleries. So in those venues, we were able to present quite a wide array of works from the 25 years, so it did serve as a survey. So from venue to venue, it was also important to present some new works so that it felt like a new exhibition in every space. So there are a few new pieces in this exhibition. And that also kind of like, as time travels as well, like by the time 2021 occurs, that's 3 years in a journey. So to have some fresh work in place to represent the year that we're in is also really important. So yeah, in this exhibition, it's really great to have one of the early works that I did while I was here at Concordia. So there is a reclined nude, drawing on paper with charcoal, and that really does speak to the beginning of my commitments in drawing and painting, and really my foundations. So I was quite committed to figurative abstraction for the first 7 to 8 years of my career. So yeah, I'm really happy that work is in this exhibition. I think there have been a number of really key people that have affected my process as an artist, and I think about Ray Robinson. So Ray would have been the very first person outside of high school. I'm still in communique with my high school art teacher. But then when I went on to college, Ray Robinson, he finished a PhD in mathematics, and then he returned to do his MFA from the Slade in London. And so he had real ideas about what it means to be an artist, and he really taught me about discipline and commitment. He taught me about relationality. So when we were doing figurative drawings, he would establish a pose. The pose would remain the same for a month. We would tape off the model. If we wanted a variation, we would move our easels. We would draw, we would paint, we would sculpt from the same pose within a month. So like we had these pedestals on rollers, and we would put clay, and we would make the sculptures in the round around the pose. And so it was really, the sculpting would reinforce our drawing skills, would reinforce our painting skills, which would reinforce our sculpting skills. And so by the time I was a year and a half with Ray, I could, accurately drop in composition in 20 seconds in full color. And, he took us beyond what we just were only seeing as well. He really helped us to project what we were carrying inside of us as well. So from there, he really gave me the foundations and the fundamentals and the drive and the discipline. Then I came to Concordia, which was a highly conceptual school. And there were some brilliant artists there, including Bridget Radecki, who has some work in an exhibition currently. She really inspired me to approach installation in very unconventional ways. She's quite a thinker. She really made me think about exhibitions in a way that could tour or travel. So she offered glimmers of formalism, but also practical ways that we could move forward as artists and professionals. And then I went to Rutgers for my master's, and I think, people like Barb Madsen queers everything. You just have to keep on queering things, push it, make it weirder, make it stranger, take risk. She really, she was amazing. And then Stephen Westfall was quite a colorist. And he would walk into my studio and he'd be like, I don't know how you do it, but all your yellows are cold. Like, how do you do that? Yellow's warm. But your yellows, for some reason, the relationships you have with color, you're holding those in a cold place. You're holding your yellow in a cold place. And so he really challenged me with my relationships to color. So I would have to say it's through mentorship and contact. In the Indigenous art world, though, like some key relationships also really impacted me. Like my very first solo occurred at the Indigenous and Inuit Art Center in Gatineau, and above the gallery hung Androgyny by Norbert Morrisseau. And so like, it's hard not to be affected by all that color. He's like Matisse, but with narrative, and just the power in the spirit in the work. So spirit orbs continue to be part of the conversation in my work. Somehow I am able to indirectly carry some of those things into the work. So, and then I think about Alex Janvier as well. Like I did a residency at the BAM Center, and Alex was there concurrently, and it's just such an incredible work ethic. And when I think about a desire in a studio process, it really is to innovate. And Alex is really an orator. He speaks his own language in painting, and so he's definitely someone who has inspired me greatly. So I'm sitting in front of Primary Manifestos in Yellow, and this was produced in 2009. And it was really a time where I was starting to experiment with digital technologies, digital drawing. I had initially started to make abstractions of digital ancestors as early as 2000, but my skills and my relationship to this space was developing, and I wanted to really speak to that language, like digital space, and then the internet and kind of global audiences and global influences and how the media was affecting us. And so concurrently, I'm also really interested in, ethically citing influences. Like I think we're all called to do that as academics. You have to cite those authors or those other painters. You should acknowledge the artists before you. And so I'm like, from a Western space, being trained in Western institutions, Indigenous people weren't just being acknowledged. And so it was really about, the Primary Manifestos was really about acknowledging the influences that we have, in deep time, those kind of ancestral cultural influences from the four directions. So the red, the yellow, the black, and the white. The red being the Americas, black being Africa, yellow being the Far East, and then white being Europe. So I made 360 digital abstractions, so 360 references, the circle, lakes, plants, animals, and cities. And so I was acknowledging, just aesthetics traveling through time and culture. And so I would do, 360 lakes, plants, animals, and cities. And I made three large panels. And my spirit colors too, if I was to make regalia, was red, yellow, and blue. And those are the three primary colors. It's amazing because you can mix those colors to create any, variety of colors. So I really thought that was awesome. So I made the primary manifestos painting in red, yellow, and blue. So we're looking at primary manifestos in yellow. And what you're looking at is a composite of Lake Lucerne. So my father was German. So lake, plant would be the red. The red is an abstraction of a tobacco tie, acknowledging my mother's indigenous ancestry. And then the city is, this is Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, the white and black passage. That is Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. That's where I was raised, a city that really influenced and affected me. And then at 19, I did a student exchange to Brazil, and I experienced Oscar Niemeyer's Brasilia. And so it was just a really powerful city to experience at 19, just as you're becoming an adult and thinking about what you're going to do with your life. Brasilia was produced by one architect in 4 years in the middle of the Amazon. And so the presidential buildings was in the cockpit of the airplane, and then you'd go down this beautiful boulevard to the router of the plane, which is where the university is, and then the wingspan was the residential zone. So for me at 19, it was really a pivotal moment, and it was very motivating. And so it really changed me. It really kind of gave me the fuel to apply myself. So, primary manifestos in yellow. When I think about technology and the influences that it's had in propelling my work forward, I think about Kisik Acimowina, which is the law, and that is a large structure. It's been presented in a number of ways. That was presented during the Oski Aski series, and it has cutouts of organs, and it really speaks to all kinds of treachery, or it could speak to a kind of hunt or gutting of an animal skin. The way it is presented in Art Noir is how it's been presented for the most part in a number of exhibitions, and that is underneath the ladder. It is to reference a teepee. And so when I think of Kisik Acimowina, which means the law in Cree, I think about the governance model of the teepee. So every one of those teepee poles holds a value that reminds community as they enter or exit the teepee, what is holding community together, and that is women's medicine. So women are in charge of raising the teepee, but the men help. But they're really very central in this reminder of what is holding us together as a people, as community. So one of the reasons why I use the language is because I'm Cree Métis, and I think we're at this really interesting time, this necessary time of reclaiming our languages as Indigenous people. It's great that, they say that there's 80,000 Cree speakers, on Turtle Island, and you might think that's a lot. That is a lot, but I think we should all learn these languages. I think, especially because it's ancestral. So my grandmother would have spoken, my great-grandmother would have spoken it, and their mothers would have spoken it. So I think about the land and relationship to land and how we've really been gifted language through the land. So that's why I'm reclamating those practices. Also, the words that I select to work with are often imbued with deep philosophies that I then carry into my studio practice that assist me in making formal decisions in making. So that's been a really profound kind of tool to activate process in making. I love the idea of being an artist. I'm really grateful to be an artist, and I think like when we think about the first dances, the first songs, you know, what really was the intention? One could only speculate, but it was that desire to connect with each other, and it might have also been about mimicry, all of the things we've seen and heard, you know, from the animal kingdom. So I think about art as being very sacred and just a kind of extension out of those practices through time. So we carry all of that forward in the way we make. And I think about, the things we make, we are responsible to advancing our discipline. So I've really embraced experimenting with technology. So when I was in Australia in 2012 doing a residency at RMIT, laser cut machines were just becoming kind of commercially available to institutions. And RMIT is this great university, and they offer a PhD in studio arts, and the laser cutter belonged to the School of Architecture, but because I was a visiting artist, they acknowledged me as a visiting scholar, so they set up a meeting for me to meet with the Dean of Architecture, who would then grant me access to the laser cut machine. And so even those people in the PhD in the visual arts didn't have access to the laser cutter. So it was quite a lot of work to convince the dean, but he was also extremely creative at a cutting edge university. So he appointed a team to work with me to scrutinize my materials and to train me on the laser cutter. And I still had to sign off that if anything went wrong, I'd be held accountable. So it was quite stressful. But the nomadic bounce started there, and they figure it's some of the first laser cut paintings to ever be made. And so, it was really, I wanted to make work that would be modular. I was really interested, and once again, that stems back to time with Richard Radecki. How do you make work that can take on new life, take on new form? And so, I created the nomadic bounce. The first iteration literally was, the work was coming off the laser and going right into the gallery. It was just like, it took every moment we had to train and cut those pieces to get them to the install. So it was like a Mandela in a very basic city. And so then after time, it's gone to a number of institutions and it still travels since that time. So it's been 4 rabbits, it's been pronghorn antelope, it's been 2 wolves, it's been an eagle. Here it's a red-tailed hawk. So that was the first kind of laser cut that I made. And then once again, I think about my mentor, Ray Robinson, who was really encouraged discipline, but holding on to key moves and then advancing them, perfecting them. So I wanted to keep on playing with the laser cutting. So that's when we brought it into other spaces, like the work suspended off of the wall, these circular works. I think it's been challenging to be a person with such a complex identity, being Cree Métis, being fair-skinned, being queer, being two-spirited, really coming to terms with all of those things, but I feel like now it's actually added a lot of value to the statements I can make through my work. And I think it's really relevant that I tell my story as Métis people are so underrepresented in the Indigenous art world. And so I think about an elder who shared some pretty wonderful things with me, and I think was indirectly validating me, and that was that, it's like red, yellow, black, and white. We need everyone in this circle, and if we remove the white, then the circle will collapse. So it's like everyone holds gifts, everyone holds, important things to contribute in their communities. So I just take what I have, and it's refreshing now to go through the canons of Indigenous art and look at those people that I can relate to. So, like, who were queer, Indigenous, abstract painters? How can we write about them? Could we curate an exhibition? Can we bring them to the foreground? What does it mean to be Métis? In the timeline of indigeneity, it's like if we were to look at all the women who have raised children through my ancestral lines on my mother's side, like on the timeline, the women would have been Métis for this little sliver, and before that they would have been Cree, and might have been from other nations as well. So it's like when we're Métis, shouldn't we also have access to the culture that supported our ancestral line before we were Métis? So I think about all of these things, and what does it mean to be sensitive, the Cree people, like if I'm Cree Métis and I'm interested in studying Cree and learning Cree ways and going to Cree ceremony, then what does it mean to be a good visitor or a good community member in, as I'm learning these things, when they're communities that have real needs themselves. So like, I think it's about coming to terms with all of these things, But yeah, I think about being sensitive, you know what I mean? And I think that's actually what should make a great artist is like, that you're really like sensitively considering where a society, what needs to be said, how to say it in a way that's going to have impact. So these are things I'm working on. So future projects that I'm working on really are driven by my next academic pursuits. And so I've just been accepted to do my PhD at Monash University in Melbourne. So I will be studying with Dr. Brian Martin, who makes really profound, large-scale drawings. He's also the Dean of Indigenous at Monash. He's a great thinker. So the project that I'm going to be focusing on deals with language, the land, abstraction, processes, and then really thinking about how technology has become very human-centric. How can we open that up to create opportunities for the elements to participate in the conversation of our futurities? So yeah, I'm really looking forward to do that work at Monash.